Seamless, everyone. Here we go. An unprecedented double 30-second countdown to enter. Greetings, everybody. Junior scientists, citizens, the great, big, weird, wild, and wonderful world in which we live. As always, I'm your humble science communicator, the great Orbax. And thank you for joining us here tonight for the resurrection of the University of Guelph Physics live stream. It's actually our 4th anniversary, I believe. We'll talk a little bit about this in a few minutes. Teaming up with RASC Montreal, and I see a lot of RASC Montreal people tuning in. So greetings, everybody, and welcome. This is exciting to return to this stage tonight. Here we are broadcasting live from Physics Hollywood, California, located in the McNaughton building at the University of Guelph. And I'm excited to see you all. Now, again, very small basic introductions to what we're going to be doing. This stream is live tonight, and we have the opportunity to actually speak with you in real time. So if you have questions during our presentation or questions at the beginning, you can leave comments, and we can address these questions as they come up. And as you see below, we'll be able to pull up information such as that. Thanks for tuning in. Questions, ask in the chat. So without any further ado, I guess I grudgingly have to introduce our co-host for this evening. He's a former Guelph Physics, he's a former member of Guelph Physics and is now a Guelph Physics alumni. He's joining us from John Abbott College as part of the RASC Montreal. Please put your hands together for Kareem Jaffer, everybody. Let's bring him on in. Hello, Kareem.
Hey, Orbax. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic tonight. How are you, sir?
We're doing wonderful. Semester started. There's ice outside. Nothing to see in the sky except clouds. It's normal for Montreal.
Always a fun way to talk about astronomy is to use your imagination of the things you might see when you look beyond those clouds. Now,
storytelling becomes fun, right?
Absolutely. And I want to point out, I always love your streaming from your office there. I always love the dramatic appearance of perspective that your blinds always give us. It's like looking at some sort of incredibly well-drawn comic about perhaps a very boring topic. But tonight, we're here. This is, again, is this already our 4th anniversary of this?
Already our 4th anniversary. We started during COVID and we've kept it going, which has been fantastic because I like this idea of being able to connect with the students at a couple of different levels, but also with the general public. And we keep taking turns bringing in experts from the Montreal area, experts from Guelph, all involved in space sciences, which is fun.
It is. And I love doing these streams. I think they're fantastic. I think they're a great way to connect with people. And like you said, connect with people you otherwise wouldn't be able to physically be in a room with. But not only that, you're right. This is a great way to reach people. And all they have to do is tune in from the comfort of their own homes. And for somebody like me, who's been desperately trying for 25 years to get on television, I feel like this is as close as I'll ever get to my own show. So I'd like to welcome you tonight, Kareem, for joining me on my show. and we'll have it tonight.
Well, I've been waiting for your show to start up again. I've been enjoying the live streams. You've had so many great moments from physics at Guelph that you get to share with everyone. And it gives us a picture as to what's happening in the research fields across all the areas of physics. When I'm doing stuff, it's pretty much focused on astronomy, astrophysics, space sciences. But you give us a glimpse of all the areas where physics is active, which is wonderful.
It's true. I mean, we've been very lucky to be able to reach out to many of our graduates over the past 4 years of doing these. And I believe Saction's prepared a clip for us tonight. Go ahead and roll that, Saction. That's a little joke there. Saction's joining us and doesn't have a clip prepared, but that was, again, going back to my own television show.
But to give him credit, to give him credit, he's joining us from India where it's early morning hours, and he got up to join us to help us out to set up this live stream. So kudos, and a really big heartfelt thanks goes out to Saction.
Absolutely. And I typically, we don't say hold on to our co-hosts here. We try to squeeze those in when we can. But here's the thing. I think you do have something prepared for us. We'll start with our land and sky acknowledgement for the evening.
I do. And normally in Montreal, we do a land and sky acknowledgement with the specifics of the Montreal territory. But because we are both streaming in Guelph, in Montreal, across the nation and across the borders, because our speaker today is coming from the US, I thought we'd leave it with a little bit more general of a land acknowledgement by looking up at the sky. And we are today at the Wolf Moon, the January full moon, which some of the First Nations refer to as the Great Spirit Moon because it rises so high in altitude for the winter moons, where we see it much higher up in the northern hemisphere because we are tilted away from the sun. So we get to see it for longer nights, higher altitudes. It sustains us through these really long, cold nights that we unfortunately otherwise would be alone and not even getting a chance to see much in the night sky. We also see, in the Mi'kmaq, the East Coast, they call it the Tomcod spawning. We have many different names for this moon, and it has to do with the way in which it connects with nature. And that's what we remember when we talk about being on unceded lands, is the skies that we enjoy, that we research, that we learn about. We share that knowledge, not just with the First Nations, but with all the ancient cultures from across the world. So I encourage everyone to take a chance to read up on the World Astrosystems Project at the RASC, watch some of our Two-Eyed Seeing videos, both at RASC Montreal, as well as with the Global Star Parties on Tuesday nights with Explore Scientific. And as always, you can email us at montrealrasc@gmail.com with any questions. So Orbex, back to you, and let's get the main party started.
I suppose so. I do love this idea of looking out beyond what we have here. I love this idea that, like you said, we're transversing not only cities here within the same country, not across provinces within the same country, but we're also reaching out to other countries here. Truly, it's amazing what we can do when we all work together. And to add to that, let's introduce our speaker for tonight. She's joining us from Purdue University. She's a John Abbott College and RASC Montreal alumna. Please put your hands together for Emilie Lafleche.
Hi, everyone.
Emily.
Nice to join you.
Hello, Emily. Welcome in tonight.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
And how are we looking down there weather-wise? Are you also buried under snow like we are, or under rain like the rest of us?
We were last week. So for reference, I am in Indiana. I'm used to being in Montreal because that's where I'm from. So I'm used to a lot of snow in January. We rarely get snow here, but we did get like a ton of it last week, and now it's pretty much all melted. But there's just so much haze that we can't see anything in the sky. So you win some, you lose some with climate.
We're just hoping for clear skies in 75 days. In 75 days, we want clear skies for that total solar eclipse. This was the first thing Emily and I did was host an eclipse event. And this time around, we both get to see totality. So we are just aching and waiting for this.
It's going to be such a cool crossover of like almost a decade of work on both of our behalves. So I'm so excited. And yeah, I can't wait to join in the future for when we do the live stream then.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, which I don't know anybody on the planet anymore, it seems like this has been in the news and it's all anybody's been talking about. But April 8th, we have our full solar eclipse taking place on Canadian soil, on American soil, and the path totality will cross through to Mexico as well. And I guess this is the first time that we have the potential to see totality since I was reading something like the 1930s or the early 1900s.
For Montreal, it's since the 1930s, and the next time is going to be 2106. So no matter how healthy I live, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have trouble making it to that one. But this one I'm banking on, and we just, we have a 17% chance of clear skies in Montreal historically.
17, wow.
But the last two April 8ths have been clear. So if we look at a short sample size, we got
yeah. We just bring that cluster size of sampling down small enough, and I mean, you're almost guaranteed, right? It's been 100% the last 2 years.
Isn't that how science works?
Listen, we got super lucky in 2017, so here's hoping that we have good luck for April 8th and beyond.
Exactly. I love the optimism in the youth, don't you, Corbin?
I know.
Do I still count as youth at age 24?
Actually, it infuriates me.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Emily, you're studying planetary sciences and you're working on your PhD right now. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
And you were coming from John Abbott. Did you do your master's there in undergrad? Or can you give us a little bit about your history and how you got interested in pursuing planetary sciences as your career?
Yeah, so you're actually looking at the person who kind of made where you were like 2 seconds ago. Kareem is one of the main reasons why I'm in the field that I'm in right now. I started off at John Abbott College, which for those who are unfamiliar with the education system in Quebec, we don't do grade 12 in high school, we do grade 11. And then after high school, we go to this 2-year pre-university program called CEGEP. So Kareem was my astronomy professor as well as my physics professor for 2 different classes while I was there. And he, in addition to a couple of other professors, really inspired me to pursue my interest in space through the lens of planetary science, because, we live on a planet and we're looking for life on other planets. So it makes total sense to get this broader understanding of what kinds of things we might be looking for elsewhere in the universe. And so I decided to go to McGill University to get my bachelor's degree in honors planetary science. And I actually skipped the master's altogether and decided to go straight into a PhD at Purdue University. And now I'm studying exoplanet biosignatures. So, yeah.
Oh,
you're muted.
You're muted, Orbex.
Yes, I understand. It takes me a moment to control all the elements here that are involved. But no, that's super exciting. And so how did you find the transition of moving down south compared to the way things were up here? Like I said, some of this might seem a bit mundane before we get into the heavier stuff, but we try to reach a lot of our undergrads and talk to them. And one of the big exciting things that we try to get across and try to get them to see is where physics can actually take you in a career. So how was that transition? Was that presumably a pretty scary one, really? But
yeah, I mean, I think I went to McGill University, which is very close to where I've always lived in Montreal. And so going that far away from home to study and in a PhD was something that was always going to be scary, but I knew that I needed to do it. And so I kind of pushed through that fear in a lot of ways, which we're going to talk about in my presentation as well. But, I think that it's really nice to be in a place where I can work alongside people from NASA. Obviously, as a young kid who was dreaming of being involved in a career in space exploration, NASA is kind of like the big shining star, if you will. And so being able to directly collaborate with people in NASA and also get so much cool feedback and networking opportunities from people in the field, like kind of this hub that they've developed there for planetary science, has just been so amazing. So I wouldn't change it for the world, but it definitely did require a little bit of courage at first, because it's tough. PhDs are tough, and building a support system is really important.
It is, and it's one of those things where it seems like it's the natural step to continue forward and to go into the PhD, and the next step, to go into a career. But those can be challenging times, and so building an infrastructure to help support you is really a great move to make.
Yeah.
Speaking of our studies, continuing on and looking towards We have everybody in various stages of education at this point. We have people who've abandoned it, like myself. We have people who continue it, like Professor Kareem Jaffer. We have people in the midst of it, like Emilie. But we also have people just starting out their career, and we're going to introduce our latest student. You've probably seen some of her videos that we've been posting on Instagram and on Facebook and on YouTube under the moniker of Michaela in Motion. Let's welcome Michaela to our stage.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Michaela.
So Michaela is here tonight to give us a bit of an undergraduate perspective on Emilie's talk, and we'll also be fielding some questions from her and her colleagues as well. How are we doing today, Michaela?
Great. Nice foggy sky outside, a slippery driveway. It's good. I'm a whole whopping, 3 kilometers from the University of Guelph campus. So it's about the same here as it is over there.
So Michaela, you're a few years into your undergrad now. And I guess my question to you would be, as an undergrad, what do you picture when I tell you that somebody's studying planetary sciences?
You know what? I'm definitely not a planetary scientist. So when I kind of hear it, I'm intrigued to know. I want to learn more. That's kind of why I'm really excited to be here and listen to the presentation. I admire whenever somebody is in some sort of degree after an undergrad, because to me, what I think is like they're very committed to what they want to study. They're interested, they're passionate. So really, I just picture someone who's really passionate about what they're studying. So I'm really excited to learn more, but I don't know much.
No worries. We will fill you in. But for those who actually legitimately don't know what planetary science is, it's kind of a combination of every science you can think of, kind of wrapped into a very specific research question, which is, how do planets evolve over time? And what can those planets tell us about how life evolves? And that's where I come in. I consider myself more so an astrobiologist than a planetary scientist in standard talk, astrobiology being the search for life elsewhere in the universe. But yeah, planetary science is so cool because we welcome everyone, even physicists. So you're all welcome.
Even physicists.
Even physicists. Even
Jeez, you were able to get the barbs out at us before I was going to slam you.
Oh, come on!
Physics, anti-bio.
You're having some issues with Emilie's feed, right? It might drop at some point.
Listen, I will tell a quick story. So when I decided to pursue an official degree with planetary science in the name, I went to my first RASC event. I think it was like a library night or something. And I distinctly remember every single person calling me a dirt person. For that entire time I was at McGill, I was the dirt person of the RASC.
You were in the geosciences faculty. I mean, that's dirt people. That's how affectionately we call
100%. I mean, look, dirt from Mars, dirt from Earth, like it's all fascinating. So I appreciate the compliment.
Fantastic. Well, I don't know that we should be keeping your incredible talk from the public any longer. Let's just hand over the reins to Emilie, and we'll all jump back here when you're done. And I'm sure we'll have a wide variety of questions and things to chat about. So without any further ado, we'll hand it over to Emilie.
Awesome. I'm so excited. All right. Well, today I am thrilled to be able to talk to you, not about my research per se, but specifically about my experiences that I've had. Let's see if I can share my screen here. I don't know if anyone, yeah, there we go. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm excited to talk to you actually about my experiences doing analog missions, which I have concurrently done throughout my PhD. And it's something that I've wanted to do for even longer, actually, since I was in high school. And so if you don't know what an analog mission is, we're going to get into that in just a second. But I've titled today's talk, Train for the Job You Want, From Analog Missions to Training Programs. And I feel like this really reflects the journey that I've had, both as a PhD student who is continuously learning new skills in her career, both in a very legitimate hands-on way and also in a soft skills, like, networking kind of way. But also in this other facet of my existence, which kind of takes place through these missions that I get involved in. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So I guess the first question that I kind of want to just have everyone start thinking about is, how do you train for space when you're stuck on Earth? Obviously, we can think about things like, government space programs like NASA or the CSA might have, and we might be pretty already familiar with the ways that they train their astronauts down here on Earth for the challenges they'll experience in space. So you'll see the image on the left is of the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, which is down in the US, where actually I am located right now, conveniently enough. And this is a giant swimming pool, essentially, where they train astronauts in full uniform for various things that they might need to do while they're on the ISS, like putting together different pieces, repairing equipment, things like that. And so in that sense, they get a very real experience for what kinds of things they might be exposed to when they go to this foreign environment. And there's actually a second way that even the average civilian like you and me can start to train for things like space, which is incredible. And those are called analog missions. So you'll see an image on the right where you've got all of these, people wearing these faux astronaut costumes with those like packs on their back. And they are essentially at an analog site in the Utah desert. This is called the Mars Desert Research Station. And essentially, the Mars Desert Research Station is created to be an analog to the Martian environment. So by being there, people can get a sense of what it might be like to live and work on Mars, which is awesome. So to more readily define what an analog mission is, according to NASA, which of course is the source that everyone uses for pretty much everything in planetary science, analog missions are field tests in locations that have physical similarities to the extreme space environments. Now, of course, we just talked about the fact that the Mars Desert Research Station is analogous to a Martian desert, for example. And in here, you can actually see what the Mars Desert Research Station looks like. So it looks like it has sort of these different modules, and they're all connected by these different tubes. That's actually kind of similar to what we would expect an actual settlement or a habitation sort of situation on Mars might look like. And so that's one example of a pretty popular analog site that people visit. But what about bodies beyond Mars? What about the moon, for example, which is actually quite relevant to us as we're embarking on this Artemis mission journey? Both the US and Canada are involved in this. So it's really recent and really exciting stuff. And I actually got an opportunity to go to a moon analog environment called Lunares Research Station, which is actually located nowhere near where we are right now, or at least for those of you who are in North America, it's nowhere near where we are. I was in Piła, Poland, which is quite far, about a 6-hour time difference from the Eastern time zone. And it actually looks quite similar to MDRS, the one that I just showed you, except for the fact that this giant sort of thing that you're seeing here, this white sort of structure that says Lunares on it, used to be a bomb shelter. And so they've repurposed a bomb shelter from World War II in Poland to now be an analog environment where everything is contained. So what's really cool about Lunares is that it doesn't really expose the crew, the people who are going on these analog missions, to the outside world. It really forces you to immerse yourself in a lunar environment that can be quite challenging to adapt to at first, but it's such an awesome experience to be able to sort of really live like an astronaut on the lunar surface for 2 weeks at a time. And so you'll see here on the right, we have this beautiful poster in Lunares that every crew is encouraged to 3D print a sort of little memento of what their mission patch looked like, or maybe something that symbolizes what the mission that they're taking on was sort of based on, or like a theme from it. And the white arrow shows where we landed on the lunar surface. So what our whole crew kind of pretended that we were in, which is Tsiolkovsky crater on the lunar far side. And this has some special significance to me because I did a whole research project in 2020, that fateful year. I was doing a virtual research project at the University of Western Ontario, actually, with Professor Oz, on landing at Tsiolkovsky crater, because this used to be a site considered for Apollo 17, and it was discarded because of issues related to communications, which would have been really challenging on the lunar far side. But now that we've sort of resolved those issues, it's a very real possibility for us to revisit the lunar far side in the near future. And so I really wanted to select a landing site in that region. And I got to do that because I was the commander of this mission. So if I haven't already mentioned that, that was my role, and I was really, really excited to undertake it. All right, so let's talk more about this mission. We called ourselves the Vulcan mission, and Vulcan is a Roman god, the equivalent of Hephaestus in Greek mythology, of essentially blacksmith like work, working with metals and metallurgy, trying to create something from nothing. And I think that really spoke to us as a crew, because not only did we literally create something from nothing via 3D printing, which we'll talk more about in a second, Vulcan was also the god of volcanoes and volcanic activity. And Tsiolkovsky crater is actually one of the only sites on the lunar far side that has any evidence of volcanism on the outside. So not intrusive volcanism, which is below the surface, but extrusive volcanism on the far side. So you'll see that little like black dot that you saw on the crater. That's an example of extrusive volcanism. A little bit of planetary science information for you all. So it was really cool to sort of choose this name and have it all wrapped together. And our crew was just so fantastic. You'll see on the left this image of us all together with all my patches on my flight suit, some of which you'll actually recognize because the RASC logo is there somewhere. But yeah, we had a really crazy plan for our mission. We had like 3 or 4 different research projects at the beginning, and we had a very detailed sort of list of things we had to accomplish throughout these short 2 weeks on the moon, and we managed to accomplish some of them, and I will be talking today about those things. But really what I want to emphasize is the connections that we made with this crew. And that's actually one of the things that I remember the most from my mission is all the bonding that we were able to do. And the fact that I got to know these people who were from all over the world. Hassam, who's the tallest one in that image, he's from Egypt. And then Raul, the one next to him, he is from Mexico, and then Maria is from Cyprus. And so we had like a really wide range of countries represented in our crew, and we were just so excited to be able to meet each other and work together for the 2 weeks that we were on our mission. So this is the point where I would like to show you all a video of what the HAB looked like. So that dome that you might have seen in the initial image of Lunares, that's actually where the crew lived and worked for the majority of the mission. And the bomb shelter part was the part where we did our extravehicular activities, or EVAs, where we were actually going out onto the lunar surface and doing like a moonwalk, basically. So I don't know if Orbax...
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Let's go.
Can I make them slower?
Oh, that's so cool.
So noisy.
It's like perfect for pictures. I think I like the purple and the red the best.
Purple.
About like CO2 levels and temperature and all kinds of stuff. Basically just basic biometrics. And then you saw the airlock. That is actually where the suits are located. So we would be able to go into the EVA chamber, and we would have to depressurize. So we would have to sit in there and wait for depressurization before we could enter the EVA chamber. So for those of you who attended my presentation while I was actually live from Lunares Research Station, you'll remember this very well, where we actually took you on a tour of the entire habitat. And if you weren't there, it's actually still on YouTube, so you can go and catch that after today's presentation. All right. So more about what we were actually doing on a day-to-day basis during this mission. Like I mentioned, we had just so many tasks to do on a daily basis that it was really hard to keep track. And so I decided to create this like board full of tasks where everybody could check off the stuff that they'd done every day, and also kind of use it as like an announcement board. If we had to specifically change our behavior or limit things, like, for example, we used a lot of water in the initial days of our mission, and towards the end, we really needed to limit the amount of water that we were using because it was running out effectively. And so I have there written in big, bold black letters, like low water usage, to remind the entire crew that we need to monitor how much water we are using for things like dish cleanup, or even flushing toilets or showers. All of these things are using water, and we're trying to conserve it as much as possible because this is an analog mission. I also have listed underneath there all of, the different tasks for each crew member. So mine that day were something like finish the Gravels report, which we'll talk about what Gravels is in a second. But we were just working on our research projects, cleaning up the hab. So like who has to, sweep the floors, who has to check the biometrics and make sure that we're able to breathe. All of these different things that are so normal in our everyday lives were like really essential components of this mission, and required a lot of energy for everybody to be doing on a day-to-day basis. We also had different crew members assigned to meal prep and cleanup to sort of balance it out. So it wasn't always the same people who were doing the same tasks. And that's also really important for general crew mental health, because you want to sort of feel like everyone's pulling their weight equivalently. You'll see here on the right, we have some images of the crew doing their workout routines. I'm in the middle there doing some yoga. That was really fun. We got to sort of like put our own spin on the workout routines that were actually assigned to us by Mission Control, who was basically 2 people who were coordinating the entire mission. We got to only talk with them over Discord, which is like a sort of like texting platform, for those of you who don't know what Discord is. And we weren't really able to have face-to-face conversations with Mission Control throughout the entire mission. So we would chat with them over Discord. And so we asked them permission to start modifying the workout routines that were assigned to us. And they were like, sure, yeah, you can try out doing like an extra workout. And we decided to do yoga because I really like doing yoga. We also got to have our meal times together in good times and bad. So in this image, we actually completely lost power. We had a power surge, and that ended up being an issue because it happened in the middle of one of our EVAs. So we had to make a very difficult decision as to whether we continue the EVA in the complete dark, with essentially almost no communications with the crew that were standing back at the habitat, as well as Mission Control, or if we aborted the mission and returned to the habitat immediately. And because we were doing some pretty intense research work, we decided to push through. And we were all just so exhausted after that we didn't even have the energy to like cook any meals. We were just like shoving food in our face. And this image, though the lighting and quality is probably not great, it speaks a lot to me because it was a really fun moment where we were like, okay, let's just use our phone flashlights and like put them in a water bottle to like, make the light a little bit brighter. And it was really fun. So yeah. But right now I want to talk to you about the 2 main research projects of the entire mission. The first of which is an acronym that we were quite proud of at the time, but the more I look back on it, it is ridiculous, which is the testing the effects of meteorite powder on lettuce growth, or TEMPL for short. And the whole research project was kind of exactly how it sounds. We basically added meteorite powder to budding lettuce plants, and we wanted to see if that meteorite powder affected the growth patterns of the lettuce in any marked way. But the way in which we got to this research project was super, super convoluted. I, as an astrobiologist, so I mentioned this at the beginning, I study life on other planets for a living. And I was like kind of looking around the hab as soon as I got there. We were kind of just like fascinated by all the different things around us. There were so many different lab materials and things to see, right? You've never really walked into one of these places before unless you have, and it's quite shocking what it looks like on the inside. But when I was going through the electrical lab, I noticed this bottle that was labeled meteorite powder. And when I saw it, I was like, is this just like a funny joke, or is this like quite literally meteorite powder? So I didn't really think much of it until the next day when we got to meet the flight surgeon, who is a licensed military medical physician who was doing our physicals for us before the mission. And he pulled me aside and he was like, are you the person who's the planetary scientist in the crew? And I'm like, actually, yeah. And he's like, okay, I have to show you something. And he showed me this meteorite powder bottle. I'm like, oh, I saw that yesterday. Is that yours? And he's like, yes, we actually found a meteorite in the desert when I was, military medical physician for this one group. And we took it back and brought it to another planetary scientist who ground it up and published a paper on it. And now we just have all this meteorite powder lying around here. And I was like, all right, do I have permission to use this for something? Because immediately an idea popped into my head. And he was like, yeah, of course, I totally trust you. So we got special permission from the flight surgeon to use this meteorite powder and essentially like add them to these plants. I see a question. What medium were these plants growing in? So the setup that we initially had was actually a hydroponic setup. And for those who don't know what a hydroponic setup is, basically you're growing plants in water and you add nutrient sort of mixes to the water and you see like how they're able to grow in just that medium. It's actually a pretty commonly discussed technique for growing plants, when we eventually settle on Mars and things like that, we essentially would not maybe have like soil to grow these plants in. So we might be able to grow them in like water instead. The medium that we were using was the same medium that you would normally use for a hydroponic setup, which is kind of like just like roughage, like kind of just this pulpy, like, I don't know, cellulose material. And they just have these tiny little holes in them where you're meant to just put a seed and then soak the pulpy like things in the water. And that's essentially where the roots will grow out of. But we decided to modify that setup a little bit because we were using a soil analog, the meteorite powder, which was actually kind of really cool because meteorites, lunar meteorites specifically, are one of the ways in which we can study lunar materials on the surface of the moon without having to physically go to the moon. So we were kind of able to use like lunar material to test if we could grow these types of crops in lunar soil just without anything added to it. And so, we weren't necessarily like able to do a full-blown research project in just 2 weeks of growing these plants. But what's exciting is that this research project has continued on crews since my mission, which was in October 2022. And so it's been really exciting actually to see all these crews get so invested in this process. And it's just been a really fun research project to be a part of, especially since it came about in such a roundabout way. And I wasn't expecting at all to have to, be like Goodwill Hunting and just write a bunch of equations on the board trying to figure out how I'm going to make this research project work after I've been given permission to use something that every planetary scientist would die to have access to. And so this was a really fun research project for me. And the second one was actually the one that I prepared for months in advance of my mission. And this one, the acronym was super well thought out, and I actually love this one so much. Geological Research and Analysis via EVA Lunar Sampling, i.e. gravels. So this one was kind of born out of several discussions I had with the mission coordinators, where they were giving me more information about what kinds of capacities they had already in the HAB that we could use to do planetary science research. Now, as you'll remember, I mentioned that all of the EVAs are done in this this ancient bomb shelter. And so we're not really in an environment like when I showed you like the Utah desert that is perfectly analogous to a planetary body. We were kind of like in the mindset of being on the moon, but the material that was present in the EVA chamber was not directly analogous to, lunar regolith, for example, lunar soil. And so I had to be really creative with what kind of research projects I would bring to the table as a planetary scientist in an analog site that does not necessarily have the optimization in place for planetary science research. But they did tell me that they had a bunch of 3D printers. And that got me really excited because the interface between 3D printing and making tools for geology, that's right up my alley. I love 3D printing. I think it's just the coolest thing ever. And I had been dying to get my hands on a 3D printer for a while. So I decided to sort of like throw myself into designing a research project where we could use the existing material in the EVA chamber, which really was just a combination of like sand, gravel, and a bit of like boulder material, that we could test these different sizes of material on essentially these 3D printed tools that we could use for planetary science research. And my proudest sort of creation, because we designed all of these tools from scratch. We downloaded this software called Blender, which essentially allows you to create like 3D objects. And then we downloaded the files from that and converted it into a file called an STL file, which is compatible with 3D printers. And we created this thing called Roxbox 1.0, ROXBOX 1.0. And that actually was like a sample collection box that had these built-in little tubes to fill with different materials. They were different sizes, so some of them were bigger, some of them were smaller. We could customize that in our 3D print files. And we created this perfect little box that could sit on the back of our tiny little baby rover that we had access to during this mission, who we lovingly called Leo. And he would just roll around with us. We were able to remote control him while we were on our EVAs, and he would actually hold our samples for us. We wouldn't have to put all of those in our backpacks or carry them in our hands. We could literally just have Leo do all the work for us, which was really, really cool. So we actually designed it to fit perfectly to his specifications, and he's really small, right? So we really had to measure carefully. And we added a couple of cool touches, like the shelf that kind of holds the sample tubes in place so they don't shake around too much, which is really important, especially if you don't want to disturb the material that you're dealing with. And it was really just such a fun project. So we got to sort of, you'll see me in the left image designing something from scratch, which was really frustrating at the time because I had no experience with Blender, no experience with 3D printing, and this was all like a learning progress for me. So, the whole crew was really devoted to this research project, and we were constantly working on this like day in, day out, having 3D prints running overnight, trying to get this project to come to fruition. And we eventually got to test the 3D printed stuff that we made in the EVA chamber, which was like just so cool. We had like little photo shoots where we would, take pictures of how the tools like behaved when we were on the EVAs, but we also did these things called stress tests, where we would, we basically just threw the tools on the ground as hard as we possibly could. And we saw where the stress points were on all of the different models that we created. And what we found was some models were a lot stronger than others. Some methods of 3D printing that we used, some fill patterns, some fill percentages, were more like rigorous against those stress tests that we did than others. And so it was a really interesting engineering challenge in addition to a planetary science challenge to not only design these tools to be good at collecting samples, but do it in a way that makes them sustainable and useful for people using them with, these thick gloves who might drop them or, lose them somewhere, and really optimize the tools for these unique purposes that we were trying to have them, serve. So it was a great experience, not only in science, but in technology and engineering, which were things that I never personally did in school, but I got to work with a couple of engineers in my crew, and it was really fun. So the kind of culmination of all of these efforts ended up being a GitHub page where we decided to make all of our 3D printed designs, which we made ourselves, publicly available to literally anyone who wants to use them and print them on their own. So on my personal GitHub, which is Emilie Lafleche, you'll find the Gravels project. And if you click on any one of these files, you will see the actual tools that we printed and all of the different fill patterns and percentages that we recommend for them. There's different versions of each tool. So the mission after mine decided to take on Gravels once again and create a second version of the Roxbox 2.0, that actually attaches to an Arduino that moves it around. So you could have a more convenient time putting all the sample like tubes, I guess, inside the box. So, there was just such an abundance of creativity in this project. And I think that if you, ever want to print something for geology purposes or even just for fun, feel free to refer to this. And what our long-term goal is to really build on this repository and allow other people on analog missions to design and print and test their own 3D printed tools for planetary science research and add to this repository. So eventually, when crews are located on the remote surface of the moon or Mars and one of their tools broke and they have no way of replacing it with a resupply mission, they can just say, oh, cool, no worries. We can just go reprint one real quick and it won't be an issue for them at all. So that's the long-term goal of Gravels, and I'm super proud of that project. So to kind of come back to this idea of this analog mission, my main takeaways from it, I have 3 of them personally. If you spoke to my crew members, I'm sure they would have different ones. But my main takeaway involved really the psychological aspect of my mission. So you are quite literally isolated from the entire outside world for 2 weeks at a time. And while it's really exciting to be able to do all these research projects and do all these fun daily tasks that, feel maybe mundane in an average situation, but when you're in a lunar habitat, they feel just so much cooler. The psychological aspect of being with individuals that you've never met before and being disconnected from your family, friends, your support system at large, that is a really trying situation to put people in. Even people who have trained their entire careers to be astronauts will struggle with the psychological aspect of space missions. And so we did have access to a fantastic psychologist, Dr. Agnieszka Skorupa, who followed each of us before, during, and after the mission to make sure that our psychological health was okay. But it really did test our ability to communicate and to work through problems, because every crew has problems, like both interpersonal and circumstantial, that they have to go through. And in order to get through these issues, actually, one of the things I found the most important was sticking to a constant routine. Now, at the beginning, not having access to Windows, for example, which is something that I had no idea was the case, was a huge effect. Like, it had a huge effect on me because I wake up with sunlight. My circadian rhythm depends on sunlight. And you didn't really have access to that kind of thing in a hab where there's no windows, no doors that you can open to the outside world. It's just whatever artificial lighting was installed already. And so trying to really maintain like a wake up time and a go to bed time was incredibly difficult for the first few weeks. And I don't know that our crew was perfect at it. We definitely struggled a lot with it, but it's quite important to at least attempt to stick to a routine, especially with like meal times and things like that, because it makes you feel a little bit more normal. And one thing that was hard for me to swallow as a researcher is that research and your daily tasks always come second to ensuring the safety and health and happiness, really, of your crew. And, I wasn't just there to do research. I was there to be the commander. And the main job of any commander is to be a leader. To make sure that you are always taking the correct steps to ensure that your crew is doing well, and putting them above yourself in terms of importance was something that I initially went into this mission trying to do, where I would really try to protect the crew at the expense of my own sort of feelings and having a really hard time mentally with the isolation aspect of the mission. And towards the end of the mission, we kind of had this breakthrough as a group where I opened up to them and I told them that I was really struggling mentally, having a really difficult time managing all of the stress and expectations of the role that I was assigned to. And they were like, we think you're doing a great job, but we wish that you open up to us more about that, because we were feeling stressed out too. And, we were trying to put on a happy face because you were putting on a happy face. So, being super transparent and honest about your psychological struggles in a mission like this is something that not only benefits you as an astronaut and in these extreme situations, but also benefits you as a person. Learning how to be more open and how to be more trusting of people that you just met is something that, you know, maybe adults struggle with a little bit more than kids, I feel like. But, you know, if a bunch of kids were on this mission, I feel like they would have done even better than us because they are naturally predisposed to making friends and, you know, being very vulnerable with each other. So I think that really that is the key to ensuring good crew dynamics, is making sure that your crew is able to talk with one another about fun things, but also serious things. And so after this mission, I really decided to sit with myself and ask myself, how could I have been better prepared for this experience? Because this was my first ever time doing an analog mission, and it was very different from what I expected it to be. So I went back to Purdue and I decided to sort of just like, you know, let myself sit with those feelings, sit with those thoughts, and not really do much about them. But then something happened. I got a message on Instagram from somebody who said that they were the president of Purdue's first ever Space and Earth Analogs Research Chapter. And they were like, look, I really want to meet with you. I just recently heard about your analog mission through a couple of my friends, and I think that we can work together on something pretty awesome. So I met with him. His name is Rodrigo Schmidt, and he and I basically came up with this concept for, you know, this analog astronaut training program, where, you know, Purdue being this university that prides itself on space exploration and planetary science. For those of you who don't know, Purdue is considered the cradle of the astronauts because they've graduated like the most amount of astronauts, I think, out of any other university, like NASA astronauts specifically, in the US. And so it was, you know, always my goal to go to Purdue at some point because of that. But, you know, with this new, like, you know, group of people, this group called SEARCH, or Space and Earth Analogs Research Chapter, we really tried our best to immerse ourselves in the concept of Purdue's legacy of space exploration and how do we further that. So, you know, we get involved in things like analog missions, sending people to MDRS, Mars Desert Research Station. But, you know, we introduced this brand new program to better prepare students who want to become analog astronauts in the future. I would have loved to have access to this program before I went to Lunares, because I feel like I would have just gotten so much more from the experience had I been mentally and physically prepared for it. And so we came up with this entire program concept that ended up completely surpassing any of our expectations. We started with like a 3-person team, and it eventually grew to a 20-person team that, you know, we collaborated with a bunch of different other student organizations, and it became like this incredible opportunity for everyone involved, where we got to network with these industry professionals and have these amazing experiences and recruit a fantastic group of people who were training to become analog astronauts. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the crew. First, I want to say this was the first ever program of its kind because, you know, obviously we came up with this program idea from scratch, and it ran this past summer, actually in July, all the way through August. And we, as SEARCH, collaborated with 2 other student organizations, the first of which is Purdue Lunabotics, which is an organization that actually builds lunar rovers for NASA competitions every year, and PSP, which stands for the Purdue Space Program, which is a subdivision of the like SEDS initiative, which I think stands for like Students for the Exploration and Development of Outer Space or something like that. And they build rockets. So it was really cool to have the rover builders and the rocket builders on our side while we were trying to make this program happen. And they had very important roles in the activities that we ran through this program. So to meet the crew, we have Michael Radon, who his call sign was Planet Fitness because he was kind of the gym buff of the group. We assigned all of these call signs right before we went on a very special expedition that I will tell you about in just a moment. But we kind of gave ourselves these names to really enhance the crew bonding experience. So Michael Radon, Colin McGeary, whose call sign was Hermes, my own, which was Borka. Apparently that was a sort of combination of the words bubbles and orca, because I was a bubbly person and I was like a killer whale in terms of like looking really cute, but being really deadly / serious and terrifying. I don't know. That's the way that the crew explained it to me. It was quite hilarious. But I was their commander, so they were kind of trying to be nice at the same time. Then Ian Jackson, whose lovely call sign was Propulsion because he's a master's student in rocket propulsion. Elizabeth Kung, Apollo, because she was able to successfully land a fake rocket on the lunar surface. More about that in a second. And Moacir Fonseca Becker, whose call sign was Houston, because every time we had a problem, he would solve it, much like Houston, we have a problem. So our crew was awesome. And here we are posing in front of a really cool building on campus called the Neil Armstrong Building of Aerospace Engineering. Neil Armstrong is actually an alumnus of Purdue. And so it was really cool to be able to pose with him and also with Sarisha Bandla, who is one of the Virgin Galactic commercial astronauts, who is also a graduate of Purdue. So we kind of had a bunch of astronauts in the picture, which was really fun. So this program basically had the structure of being 3 weeks long, and we had 3 separate themes integrated into the program, which I felt were the main themes that I experienced when I was at Lunares. So the first being science and technology, so obviously having the capacity to understand research projects and the technology required to conduct a successful space mission. The second was health and fitness. So this was a super key category, maintaining a healthy body, mind, and spirit while you are in this crew of people that you just met, and doing that by bonding and playing games and conducting other kinds of activities that really emphasize health and nutrition and all of those fun things. And then the third one was astronautics and spaceflight. So quite literally understanding the mechanics of how to get from point A, Earth, to point B, space. So we had lectures on rocketry, satellite building, all kinds of stuff that was really, really fun and enriching for the crew. So just a quick peek into how packed the crew schedules were for this program. They were, 9 to 5 or even 9 to 7 on some days, completely busy with activities spanning from presentations to workshops to hackathons to flight tests, where we actually were able to go and fly planes on campus. We have an airport at Purdue for private licenses. So we were able to, have like a licensed pilot teach us how to fly a plane, which was just the coolest thing ever. And, like a million other activities that were interspersed in between, like science communication and outreach. So we were very, very busy. And this packed schedule definitely changed over the course of, the weeks that we were running the program, depending on the weather, for example. Experiencing thunderstorms when you're supposed to be flying a plane, not great. So, all those different things affected the schedule, but, we really tried to replicate the structure of an analog mission where you are literally booked from the moment that you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep. So we really, gave the crew that experience in that respect. And some of the main highlights of the program, there are just so many, but I'm going to be going through my personal favorites and trying not to keep you all too long, because I do want to leave a lot of time for questions as well. The first of which is the Kerbal Space Program Workshop, which, remember when I mentioned Elizabeth being the only person who is able to land anything on the lunar surface. Well, this is how we kind of did that. So Kerbal Space Program is a really cool sort of like game, if anybody is familiar with it. If you're not, I highly encourage you to go look into it. And it essentially simulates building a rocket and launching it and being able to deliver it successfully to the lunar surface. And each of these 2 different teams, you'll see, like in the front, we have Elizabeth and Moa, and in the back, we had the other 3 guys, and they were all working on like building their custom rocket in this simulation and launching it. And really, Elizabeth was the Apollo of the group, kind of like really successfully landing. Or crash landing, because she got far enough, but then her lander did not like land properly. The foot was broken, so she kind of crash landed into the moon, but we gave her like props for getting there anyway. And this was a really fun workshop because it was actually one of their first as a team, and they kind of had to use it as an icebreaker almost to get used to each other and communicate effectively and make sure that they were on track to succeed in their mission. And the second thing that I really loved was the Q&A we had with the Mars Desert Research Station crew. So Purdue actually sends their very own crews consisting entirely of Purdue students and faculty to the Mars Desert Research Station every year. And we got a chance to invite the most recent crew at the time to come and talk to our crew and let them know what their experience was like on their own analog mission, and give them an idea of what kinds of tools they used on their analog mission as well. You'll see in the lower right-hand corner this like drone that the crew was able to use for monitoring the safety of the people going on EVAs. So that was such a fun experience. We got to like talk to them for like an hour and a half, which was way longer than we ever anticipated this Q&A to be. And we got to meet the director as well of the Mars Desert Research Station. So I think it really inspired the crew to apply for future calls. We also got an amazing opportunity to talk to these two fantastic speakers. My favorite of which is Catherine Dulong, my bestie, who is also a registered dietitian in Montreal, and she had a previous experience as an intern at the Canadian Space Agency in the Deep Space Food Challenge. So I invited her to come and give a presentation on all of that work and how we could essentially develop these nutrition strategies for long-term space exploration for astronauts. And the crew just absolutely loved it. They were so interested. They had so many questions afterwards. And so that was one of my favorite presentations. But my other favorite presentation was the one that we got from Michelle Thompson, who is not only a professor in Purdue Earth and Atmospheric and Planetary Science, which is my department. She's one of my main mentors, but she's also one of the top 30 of the most recent call that the Canadian Space Agency had for astronaut candidacy. And so she made it super far in the astronaut selection campaign that we ran back in 2016 or something like that. I actually was, a 16-year-old at the time, but I applied in the same cohort just thinking, oh, well, I just want to have my application in there somewhere. I just want someone to reject me because I would love to have an email from the CSA rejecting me for this. But she actually made it really far, and she gave us a whole overview of her experience in the selection process, which was invaluable for our crew members, that we got a chance to talk to her who had this lived experience with what some of these people who want to apply to be astronauts in the future will be legitimately experiencing in the next 10-20 years. So yeah, that was amazing of her. I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk to her about that. Now, okay, my personal favorite thing that we did throughout this entire program, the flight tests. Now, well, like I mentioned, we are super lucky on campus at Purdue to actually have an airport located on campus. We actually have an aviation technology program that trains people to become pilots. And that's a whole undergraduate degree that you can undertake at Purdue. But we got a chance to do some little ground school activities. So we met with a registered private pilot, and he gave us a whole overview of what a small Cessna plane, how it works, what it looks like what areas we need to check before we're allowed to go and fly it. So we got ground instruction essentially in preparation for our eventual flight tests, which I would like to show you a video of right now.
Hey, Emily, when the video was on before, it overrode your audio.
Okay,
So
I'll stay muted for this
again,
part.
Yeah, sounds good.
So that video was taken by Moa, one of the crew, who was sitting in the back seat while I was learning how to fly the plane in the front seat with the instructor. And I just I don't know, when I see that video, it just kind of makes me emotional because I one of the main things that was limiting me personally from wanting to pursue a career as an astronaut was the fact that I was told that I couldn't fly because, you know, I had glasses and maybe my eyesight wasn't good enough, or maybe I wouldn't pass the physical for various reasons. And so this was all sort of a lot of stuff that was limiting me from trying to pursue this dream. But, you know, getting that validation of sitting in the driver's seat and being told how to do all of these things and actually doing them, flying directly past a storm was just so crazy. And I can't even describe the experience that we were all able to share together in this moment. That was quite difficult to achieve because the weather was not cooperative throughout the majority of our attempts of doing these flight tests. But I would not have changed that for the world. I think, you know, if we had just done this for the program and done nothing else, honestly, I think a lot of them would have been really happy with that, because they just got so much out of these flight tests, and it really made their dreams of becoming an astronaut feel so much more real. You know, having a private license is something that, you know, a lot of people do when they have dreams of becoming an astronaut. And so giving them this opportunity to do it and having it be funded by Purdue, you know, we applied for a bunch of grants to make sure that these students would not have to fund this by themselves. It was just so incredible. And I'm really glad that we were able to get this done for them. So moving on into the other different amazing workshops that we did, this one's definitely a close second for me in terms of the favorite ranking. This was the Lunabotics rover workshop. So I mentioned that Purdue Lunabotics is that student organization that builds their own lunar rover every year and enters it into a NASA competition. Well, they had just finished building their rover, and they asked us if we wanted to test it out, sort of really teach these individuals how to actually use a rover, because that's a skill that you need to have if you're going to use a rover on an analog mission. So we got to bring this massive rover, after doing a quick technical check of it, into the regolith room, which is really just this tiny little plywood room that they built outside in the super hot Indiana summer, and filled with a bunch of soil that simulates the lunar soil. And the crew took turns basically trying to scoop up material and put it into a bin in the fastest amount of time possible without losing too much of the material. And you know, the crew that won is posing in the right-hand image. They were very proud of themselves. They were fully decked out in their Tyvek suits because obviously you can't breathe in the lunar regolith. It's quite dangerous, actually. So they were fully decked out in N95s and clean room gear. But this was a really fun experience to get to learn how the mechanics of a rover work, and, you know, be able to talk to the people who built it and really learn about the entire system as a whole, which was really, really fun. We also, so we talked about this, but the PSP Kerbal Space Program workshop, we got PSP in, and they were able to help us through the program and teach us how to launch rockets, which was fantastic. Deserves a second mention. And then we got to go to this center on campus called the Bechtel Center, which is the Design and Innovation Center. So they have a ton of 3D printers in here, right up my alley. They have a soldering room, which you'll see me and Ian posing in there with the soldering masks on. They have a room for student organizations that build things to build their things. We're able to see this prototype of a race car that one of the student organizations on campus is currently building. And that was really, really cool. There was also an electrical room where there's a person on staff that can help you pretty much build anything you want completely for free, especially if it has to do with a research project that you're doing on campus for some reason. So it was just a really cool idea to have a center on campus accessible to any student who wants to build something. And Purdue having this enormous legacy of engineering, I think it was a fantastic idea to have it. And so because it was super new, we were given a tour of it, and it was just super fun to be able to do all that. But in addition to all of these workshops and technical activities, we also did our psychological and like health and fitness sort of objectives. So we did a lot of cognitive tests using this application called Lumosity, which was monitored by our psychologist, actually the exact same one that I had on my mission at Lunares, Dr. Agnieszka Skorupa. And we also did mental health check-ins where we would have the crew fill out a form at the end of every day, not only asking about how they were feeling and how they felt that the day's activities went for them, but also about crew dynamics, whether they were having interpersonal issues with the crew that I, as the commander, could help moderate or mediate, I should say, or if I could step in somehow to make their experience better. And I think that the idea that we were able to see the results of these forums and interact with each other and really have that open dialogue throughout the entire program was extremely beneficial for the overall well-being of the crew. And we also were able to do a little bit of outreach. So Purdue has this YouTube channel called Superheroes of Science, where faculty, students, all kinds of people on campus film videos for science outreach. And we actually had the crew develop 2 different videos explaining different topics to kids of elementary school age. So one of them was like Mars rovers and what kinds of things the Mars rovers are doing on the surface of Mars. And the other one was related to food in space, which was inspired by Catherine, and was also related to fitness in space. So how do astronauts work out in places like the ISS? So this was a really fun experience for them because some of them were camera shy. So they had to learn to be able to express themselves in a very, upfront way, but also communicate essential information to the public, which is a skill that, every astronaut has to possess when they're doing outreach of any kind. So this was really, really cool for them. And then all of this culminated in a capstone mission design challenge where the crew was able to come up with an entire lunar mission from start to finish. And they had to put together all of the elements that we had explored in the program, going from science and technology, health and fitness of the crew, and astronautics and spaceflight. And each one of them took on a different one of those themes. So the final project ended up being a really cool one where they kind of integrated all of the different things they had learned over the past 3 weeks and were able to come up with a pretty solid mission concept where they came up with a rover design that was optimized to do some kind of task. They came up with probiotics that could supplement astronaut health when they're, eating these like freeze-dried foods and things like that. All kinds of really cool stuff. So they were super creative with this. And I think that most of them really enjoyed this challenge, despite it being definitely a challenge for them. They got a lot out of it for sure. And now the final aspect of the program, the NASA Adult Space Academy. So we really wanted to end this program off on a special note, especially since they had been preparing for 3 whole weeks. And what better than to take a trip to Huntsville, USA, to the place where all, kids, young and old, dream of going to train like astronauts. And so we actually got to go do space camp, which for those of us who are Canadians or even just international people in general, non-Americans, we do not have access to space camp. And, I wanted to do space camp so bad as a kid. I knew that kids in the US would go to Huntsville and get a chance to do the zero gravity simulator and get a chance to walk as if they were on the lunar surface and, learn how to do EVAs. And we actually got a chance to do all of those things, but in an adult context. So we were kind of training in a little bit more of an official capacity than an elementary school aged kid would. So you'll see all these images. Like, I feel like I could just talk through these forever. But, this left-hand one, me and Ian, one of the crew, we were doing an EVA as part of one of our simulations that we were doing. So, I was wearing a much less official looking suit than the one that you saw in the sort of title slide of this presentation. But it was very fun nonetheless. We got to go fix like some solar panels on the outside of the ISS for this particular EVA. And then we got a chance to sit in one of the capsules that the Apollo astronauts would have had to sit in when they were, going off and doing all their cool stuff around the moon. And turns out that being short like I am is actually a huge benefit to fitting and being able to live in one of these capsules for an extended period of time. So that was a fun discovery that I made. And then we also got a chance to sort of be tethered onto these giant spring systems that allowed us to be suspended as if we were experiencing the 1/6 of the gravity that we experience here on Earth, which is sort of meant to simulate what a moonwalk would feel like for a person. It was much harder than it looks. You're kind of just tumbling and falling like a little kid learning to walk for pretty much the first half of the experience. And then you eventually get better at it and you're like, wow, this feels so cool. I wish I could walk like this all the time. So that was a really fun experience. We also got a chance to do some show and tells. So we looked at some archive material from the NASA Center that was right next to the Space Camp Training Center. And here you see an image of a very old Apollo space boot. They literally look like they're wrapped in tinfoil, which was crazy. And a bunch of freeze-dried food left over from the Apollo missions, which is kind of disgusting, but it hadn't been opened, so I guess it's technically still fine to eat. Catherine, you'll have to let me know if that's the case, but we were kind of just really curious about what this food looked like, and we were kind of like, okay. Well, hopefully there will be advancements in astronaut nutrition over the next decade that prevents this from needing to be like, you know, a necessary part of our diets. Okay, and this is the final video that I want to show you guys. This is the multimodal axis simulator, which you know, kind of is meant to simulate how you feel in zero gravity, where you are just being constantly flying around, and it's, you know, your head is like on the floor, but there's really no up and down. So it's supposed to be kind of like nauseating when you're on it. That wasn't my personal experience. I didn't really get sick or anything, but this is a video of me on this multimodal axis trainer. So enjoy.
Woo, it's coming.
Hey, that's going to be about 15 seconds. How do you feel so far? Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
And we're about 30 seconds in now. You still doing okay? Yep. All right. So we have approximately 5 seconds left.
Woo.
All right, so that was my lovely experience on the MMA. And we also got to act as mission control during this Adult Space Academy. So I was sitting in the sort of second seat from the left. And then Moa, who was also one of the crew, was sitting right next to me on the right. And he was ECOM, which electrical engineering communications, I'm pretty sure, environmental. I clearly did not take enough notes. I remember that it stands for something very cool. But yeah, there was a bunch of different positions that we had to sit in and really like immerse ourselves in. We were given this giant binder of things we had to say when the mission was happening. We did not do super well on our first try because it's quite hard to be mission control. But it was such a fun experience. And I would love to learn more about this kind of thing because clearly it takes a lot of training to be good at this type of thing. So that was fun. And then we got to build our own rockets, launch them. We got to build these sort of like heat shields to protect an egg from being incinerated. Ours was the best, I would like to report, out of all the other groups that did it. So I was super proud of us. But also, to be fair, we had like 3 engineers and 2 scientists on the crew. So it was, I feel like it was kind of in our favor. But yeah, I thought that was just such a fun experiment. Here is all of us launching our rockets in the official Rocket Launching Center. Unfortunately, mine got stuck in a tree, so I was not able to go collect it afterwards. But it was still very cool to be able to launch it. And then at the end of the program, we got a chance to go explore the museum, and we saw these massive rocket engines that were developed by engineers in Huntsville for the Apollo program. So that was a really fun way to cap off the entire experience. So what's next? What's next for this program? What's next for me? I would love to do another analog mission personally. I served as the Student Analog Astronaut Training Program lead for SEARCH for an entire year, and I've decided to officially give that position to a new person to allow someone else to experience this awesome program. But the future outlook for the SA²TP, which is what we call it, the Student Analog Astronaut Training Program, is to make these experiences even more amazing for the crew, to really immerse them in the training concept and send them in the future on a real analog mission, give them the opportunity to train not only in flights and do flight tests, but also to obtain a scuba license. And maybe even explore NASA centers, like the one that hosts the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. So all of these things are, on the horizon for this program. And I would love to see future crews and how they adapt to these situations that we put them in and give them all these cool opportunities to grow and learn from. So with that, I would love to take your questions. Thank you so much for listening to my rambling for like close to an hour. And yeah, I can't wait to hear what you all thought of this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emily. Let's hear it for
fantastic.
everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So let me just fix these up here. Well, you know what? I want to go directly to Michaela here and get the undergraduate perspective. Michaela, I mean, this is a fascinating subject. It must hold a myriad of questions. And for those of you who don't know, technically a myriad is 10,000. So a minimum of a myriad of questions. Michaela, do you have anything that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, no, first of all, Emily, amazing presentation. I really loved learning more about the group, the program, everything. I did have some questions. This was something, and perfect because it came up. I know you've done a couple, I was looking through your blog as well. You've done a couple really cool summer, I know they're kind of old posts, but I really enjoyed them. You did a couple like really cool research projects through the summers and Lunares and all these other things that you've done. As someone who might be like looking at applying to these summer research positions or just research projects in general, is there any sort of advice that that came about when you were applying to these, or maybe like choosing between different projects, different career paths, things like that? Anything kind of come up?
Yeah. So, okay, this is actually a question that I get all the time from people that I mentor. It is something that is a very personal decision when it comes to making that choice between different programs that you're applying for. But what I would recommend the most is trying to experience as many different types of research as possible before committing to something for, let's say, grad school. There's just so many different programs out there. The ones that I was a part of were like the one at the Institute for Research on Exoplanets in Montreal. I also did research at the University of Western Ontario Space and Earth Exploration Institute. So there was just I tried to diversify my experiences as much as possible because I was a person who's very indecisive. So I wanted to do everything all at once. I wanted to do moon research. I wanted to do Mars research, do exoplanet research. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to specialize in at the time that I started my degree. So if you are in a similar situation or anyone else is in a similar situation, I would encourage you to take advantage of the professors in your department, the professors maybe not in your department at other universities that you're just so intrigued by their work. Reach out to them directly and see if you can work with them over the summer or even, as an honors research program. It's just, I love undergrad because it gives you so many opportunities to just decide what you like and find your niche within a really big field that can feel quite overwhelming, but you feel like you kind of belong to a part of it. And I think that's what's really full about internships.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for your answer. I'm a very indecisive person as well. It's mainly why I ask. And, you say that a lot of undergrads and people you mentor ask this too. Basically, when I talk to people about what would you like to hear, things like that, this is a question that comes up a lot. Okay. How do I know what I'm doing? So thanks for that. And this is a perfect segue. I wanted to ask, if you could go back to your first yourself, talk to your first yourself, what advice would you give her at that point in time?
Oh my God, I would tell her to calm down. I was such a stressed out kid. I mean, I've always been a stressed out kid. Kareem can speak to this.
I get it.
But I think that there's just so much pressure, when you start university, when you start anything new, even my grad program, there was so much pressure to, guns blazing, just be the best version of yourself you can be and do amazing stuff everywhere. And, it can look like that from the outside, but on the inside, imposter syndrome is so real and can feel so daunting as especially a first generation student like I am. So I would honestly encourage people to just take a breath and realize that everyone has their own path and journey in STEM. and that no one's journey is going to look like someone else's. Like I was, looking at my mentors and idolizing their paths, but, they opened up to me and said, like, when I was in your position, I would have never imagined things going that way. Like I had a very different direction that I was heading in, and then they kind of all worked out in the end. And so that idea of things eventually working out, even if they feel very nebulous and random, I think that's something that, should have everyone just like take a breath and calm down about, because it will be fine. Everything will work out, even if it feels like it doesn't. So.
Ooh, now that's hard advice to follow.
No, I know. I want to talk. Like I am living and breathing that experience right now as we speak. So it's more for me than it is for anyone else.
But this is something that reoccurs in so many of these streams where, you look at somebody at a certain path in their career, whether they're a few years out of school or whether they're like Kareem and they're many, 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 many years out of school. And it's one of the things to remember is that, your journey to this point has been a journey. You've gone through all these different things. And one of the things that I try to tell so many young people as well is that things changed. What you're interested in now is something to study now. It doesn't mean it's the only thing you have to do for the rest of your entire life.
Yep.
You can continue to learn and to grow and to see all these things. So we hear that a lot from our guests, where they go back and tell them it's like, just relax, enjoy what you're enjoying now. It might sound corny, but the idea of being present is a real thing. Enjoy what's happening at this moment in time, and recognize that if you don't understand something right away, you can work towards understanding it, or you may never understand it, but you could still have a life that exists well. Exciting.
Yeah.
There's been some questions that have come up in the chat. One is from Diana Phillips, who has now left the chat. But I wanted to bring this up because they had a couple of questions. It seems to directly relate to what Emilie was speaking about. Diana says, thank you, Emilie. We share a lot of common experiences, especially Space Camp Alabama. I'll be in touch with you as we prepare for a 2025 analog mission. Bravo to you.
Yeah.
But they had a question, which was this, and had more to do with the first part of your talk, that other than your fitness activities, what other types of communal activities do the group engage in? Where I imagine there's bound to be a ton of downtime where you have to sort of entertain yourselves. What goes on during those times?
Yeah, we actually watched a lot of movies. That was one of our favorite things, because the atrium is just designed to be such a cool space to watch movies in. There's a bunch of beanbag chairs on the ground, and the lights are all multicolored, and you have this cool screen in front of you. So I think we watched Encanto, which was one of my favorite movies. And I think, what else did we watch? We watched the Buzz Lightyear movie, I think, because space.
The new one?
Yeah. Lightyear, I think it's called, literally. And I wanted to watch The Martian, but I don't think we ever ended up watching The Martian because we got so caught up in research, which was my own fault, to be honest. But I did watch The Martian on the plane ride there and on the plane ride back. So don't worry, it was part of my training protocol. I knew it would happen.
On brand.
Very on brand for me. It's like, I feel like my story is aligned with Mark Watney's in, just so many ways. So it was definitely one of the main things we did for bonding.
I suppose it's better that than something more like Mars Attacks.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of trying to keep it light. It's important for when
it's an Academy Award heralded comedy. I mean, it really.
Yeah, I mean, we had moments where we were also playing more, I guess, in-person games. We were playing this one game where we were there was this app, I think, that one of the crew knew about, and it was sort of simulating having to be saving a mission. We were all going to die if we didn't press these buttons in the correct order.
That's right. Keep it light. Yeah.
Yeah, keep it light. It was one of the first icebreakers that we did. And I was like, wow, this feels really serious for an icebreaker. Everyone's yelling at each other pull the lever now. We have 10 seconds. And we're where is the lever? We don't even know what we're doing. So I don't know. Things like that, I think they're fun, but they can also cause conflict. So it's, it's a toss-up.
It's a great time. Not stressful at all.
No, not at all. There was definitely no stress whatsoever throughout the entire mission.
I think your Lunares reunion is going to be in an escape room by the sounds of it.
It honestly, it felt like an escape room. Like in some ways, it really did. And I think that actually made it much more immersive in a way because you know, like how escape rooms can really put the pressure on you to solve a problem. Except it was extended over the course of 2 weeks instead of like a couple hours. So it was just like a crazy long like escape room, basically.
I saw another question pop up. Did you see that one?
Yeah,
Just
by
here.
Honeysuckle, right?
Yep.
So what was the procedure to understand how to research your interest / question? The research process is one that is very complicated and can sometimes feel almost like, you know, a bolt of lightning hitting you, but sometimes it can feel like agony. And not knowing what direction you're going to take this concept in. Luckily for the Gravels research project, that one I had a lot of time to prepare for, but it felt definitely the most difficult to come up with because I was working with a limited sort of region of planetary science to address. The main reason why I was recruited as commander was because they'd never had a planetary scientist at Lunares before. And they really wanted to emphasize that area of research to diversify their research portfolio. But I looked at what they had and I was like, I don't know if I can do too much with this. Like, you know, sand is great, gravel is great, but none of it is in situ, which means like in the original place where it formed in. And it would be very difficult for me to come up with a project for that. So the idea of integrating 3D printing into that really made the project feel cool to me. And that's why I, you know, centered so heavily on that as being like the thing I was going to learn when I was there. But the Temple research project was totally different. That one was the bolt of lightning, where I was just like, you know, literally writing on the board at lightning speed, being like, oh my God, I have an idea. I cannot lose this idea. Like I have to write everything in my brain on the board before it, you know, leaves forever. And the crew was just looking at me like, okay, we have a crazy commander. But it was honestly like a fun research project for that purpose, like that I was able to not only integrate my experience in planetary science, but also in astrobiology. So yeah, I think research project like procedures are challenging to develop and even more challenging to be inspired to develop. But sometimes they happen and sometimes you just have to work at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's valid.
Well, we probably got time for one or two more questions if there's any that pop up in the chat. In the meantime, I'll throw back to Michaela there. Michaela, you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, so it sort of comes from when I was looking through your blog, and I'm really happy that you touched on some of the things I wanted to talk about. So it's perfect. You talked a lot about optimizing not only physical health but mental health and all this. And this is more along the lines of in the context of an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree. But I'm wondering if there's any like steps that you kind of like to follow to avoid burnout, to avoid toxic productivity. I saw on your blog. That one really caught my eye. I really enjoyed that article. And so, you know, there's lots of things. So anything that might help you like today, if you still struggle with it, or something that helped you in the past, maybe?
I see Kareem laughing because I know he knows what I'm about to say.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
So the issue is that there is no perfect solution to that, right? Like academia, as it currently stands, has a lot of issues. And I'm going to be pretty upfront about that because I am very much immersed in that field right now.
Right.
And, you know, supporting other students going through similar things is so important, but is also the most difficult, especially when you're constantly being compared to one another and you're fighting for the same opportunities, you're fighting for the same grades. Like, you know, these things make it just so many more times more difficult to feel like you don't need to overexert yourself or you don't need to burn out in order to achieve these goals. But the best thing I can, you know, sort of encourage people to do is to find what they're most passionate about and try to focus on the reason why you started in the first place. You know, it's always been hard for me to, you know, find determination in moments where I feel like my passion has evaporated. Like I am a very passionate person and a lot of my hard work comes from the fact that I remind myself constantly of why I love what I do. And in moments where that feels like it dwindles a bit because it's just like you're putting in so much more effort and it's not necessarily coming back to you in a positive way. It's really, really challenging. So I will say, like, there is no perfect solution, but talking about it with people, being open about your experiences can invite other people to share their experiences and make that imposter syndrome go down a little bit, feeling like you're not alone, seeking help in any way that might mean to you, like by talking to your friends or family or a therapist, like anything like that, can really be beneficial. But also doing, things that speak to you as a person, like beyond academia, not just being a student or a researcher, but also being like, the kind of person that you have always wanted to be. Like, get involved in your hobbies, get involved in side projects like what I've done with the analog stuff. I mean, mind you, that's still kind of related to my research, but, like ways that you can sort of grow as an individual beyond the things that you are known for in your work is quite important. And being a well-rounded person will allow you to adapt and overcome to challenges that come up in every facet of life. So, don't just focus on one thing. Try to be a well-rounded person and always ask for help when you need it.
I really like this dynamic we have on the stream right now, because I see Orbach smirking, because we had a very similar conversation about a lot of this of what do I do? How do I know what to pick? So yeah. I see him smirking, and I think you and Kareem have this similar dynamic going on. Yeah. But otherwise, like, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your answers. I think that's all my questions, unless there's something else.
And thank you for
thank you very much.
Thank you for your time tonight, especially to the viewers that we've had tonight, those joining us from the RASC groups, those joining us through Guelph Physics channels, and those joining us just because they happen to stumble upon an incredibly well-given talk amongst 4 incredibly charismatic presenters. So, I always like to give everybody an opportunity to plug. Emilie, if people wanted to follow you, to see more of your research, to see what you're up to, I don't know if your pet has an Instagram page. Now's your opportunity. Go ahead and share that with our viewers.
Yeah, wait. Okay, so I think she's been wanting to leave my room for the last hour and a half, but let me show you my cat because she would love to meet you. Hang on. Come here, Amy. So this is my astrobiology cat. Her name is Chai. She has an Instagram. It's called Spicy Girl Chai. I also have my own personal human Instagram called Astro Emilie, no capitals or anything like that. And I like to post about various things going on in my life and things I care about. So feel free to follow me there.
Fantastic. Michaela, where can people follow you?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram. It's Michaela in Motion, just as it appears on the screen, but I have periods between the words there. So Michaela in Motion, you can find me on Instagram.
Kareem?
RASCMontreal.org or youtube.com/RASCMontreal. And if you go to the YouTube channel, under the live streams, you will find Emilie's 2022 Townsend, and you'll find Catherine's part in our second live stream 2 years ago when she did her Deep Space Food Challenge talk for us.
Nice.
Fantastic. And of course, if you're interested in physics content or just interesting science content in general, you can follow Guelph Physics on all of the various we're producing for YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram these days. And recently, I might as well announce to our viewing public, we hit a milestone for us as a page where our page recently hit 1 million views.
Ooh.
So
yeah, it did.
So we're pretty happy. I realize that many channels can get 1 million views on a single video, but for a fairly niche educational science channel, we're pretty proud of that. So I want to thank everybody for all the support through all of that as well, and again for tuning in tonight. So I guess that's it, everybody. Take care, enjoy your evening, and have a science-tastic day.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I'm stealing that. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.